Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for sticking with me. In this episode, we're going to deal with the warm-up regulator that we figured out in the last episode was causing the engine to be so lean when it was running. And we're also going to deal with that coil wire you can see right over my shoulder. The ignition wires that I bought for the car are actually off a Chrysler V8. And the 4 spark plug wires were great. I had to make my own coil wire there. And unfortunately, the Chrysler set did not come with a 90-degree connector like you need for the coil. So I had some left over from a set of Ferrari wires I did a couple years ago. Again, using Chrysler V8 stuff, I think. Maybe that was a small block Chevy, and that's why I got the 90-degree fitting in that kit. So I brought that home from the shop, and we're going to swap that out. I'm also going to probably move on to the brakes if we have time today. So here we go. Replacing the ignition coil wire, step 1. All right, first thing I'm going to do is pull the grommet off of the old coil wire. You can see it had this 90-degree bend here, so we're basically going to replicate that. I would reuse this, but some rodent ate it. I think that's the whole reason we replaced spark plug wires in the first place. So the right way to do this would be to pull it completely off the car, but I'm going to try and be lazy and do it from right here. So I am not using this boot, so the easiest way to get it off of the wire is with a razor, and try and be careful to not cut into the actual plug wire. Cut a little bit deeper there. It's a fresh razor blade, and the silicone rubber, whatever, is pretty soft, so it cuts pretty easy. Okay, I'm pretty sure I'm not the one that crimped that, because it's not a very pretty crimp. I mean, it's working. Okay, so we're going to pull this off. Ta-da. Okay, this is the actual conductor of the wire, this little black. I know it's not a wire, but it's supposed to have a certain amount of resistance to cut down on interference. Okay, so put the grommet in, or you will regret that later. All right, that is good. Luckily, we've got a little bit of slack on this, so let's hit this with a little WD-40. I'm wearing gloves not because this is dangerous, just because I don't particularly like the smell of WD-40 on my hands. So we're going to shove this through. And try and flex this so we can shove it through a little deeper. I have a flathead screwdriver here. I think I can use that to help get the angle. There we go. And you want to actually shove through a little bit too far so that the wire's sticking out like so, and that gives you room to do the crimp. All right, ta-da, see, plenty of room. All right, this is the end, and what we'll do is we'll actually bend this after we crimp it on. So you fold the conductor under, and you can catch it there. And I brought a little crimping tool that has slid down, and I don't see it now. Okay, I've got my crimping tool. I'm going to load my wire into there like so, and put the crimping tool on like so, and then the other part of the crimping tool. This crimping tool is supposed to be used in a vise, but like I said, I'm trying to do this without having to pull this wire off the car. We'll see if we can squeeze this with a pair of channel lock pliers. And disassemble. Ta-da, beautiful crimp. And you can see the conductor wire It's folded back inside, so it's definitely touching the metal there. So this needs to rotate a little bit. There you go, line that up. Pull this back through. And maybe I should have bent it before I pulled it. I can see the spot. Okay, should have bent it before I pulled it. Use my pliers to pull it gently back out. I don't want to kink this. Well, not everything goes easy every time, huh? Okay. If I can go the wrong way, I get it to go the way I need it to. Okay, bend it before you push it through. That's requiring the pliers too. Okay, hold it on the crimp. Nope. A bit more. Trying to get it the perfect 90 degrees here. But at the same time, I'm also muddying up my crimp. There we go. 90 degrees. Easy peasy, right? Push and pull kind of at the same time to get it fed in there without causing any connection issues. There we go. Feed some of that back into the engine bay. Voila. It's all fancy because it says Excel. But now that'll clear the piece that installs here when you have the trunk carpet and such. Okay, that was easy. Actually it wasn't, but we did it. Okay, so next let's tackle the battery connector, because I've been having to hot wire. You can see this red wire here goes to the fuel pump fuse. So I've been having to hot wire the fuel pump singular to get that to work. So let's go ahead and fix that. Not a lot of slack on that. Slide this boot back. I don't know if I'll be able to use it with the new style battery terminal, but hopefully it won't be too bad. I should have filmed what I just did, but honestly it was such a Hail Mary's chance of working that I didn't think it was worth either of our times to film it. So I remembered that I sprayed that connector with some penetrating lube last week, so I thought I'd see if it did anything. Grabbed a pair of vice grips, grabbed my impact, and managed to break the bolt that goes through the battery connector. But in this case, that's actually a good thing, because that's exactly where the corrosion was. So instead of replacing the battery connector, it looks like I can just clean it up and install a new bolt. Okay, we're gonna hit this with some battery terminal cleaner. I believe this can's probably from 1979. See if that'll get rid of a little bit of corrosion for us. We're going to scrub it with a wire brush. sure some of you are going to comment that I should like soak this in some sort of Coca-Cola based concoction or baking soda and baby aspirin. Everybody has their own bizarre ways of cleaning up battery terminals. I literally just own battery terminal cleaning spray. It's not expensive. Using the battery to spread the terminals a little bit. They were bolted together super tight. Come back up. There we go. That's cleaning up pretty nice. Okay. Right about now, I remembered I actually own a battery terminal cleaning brush. Shouldn't need to do it on this. This battery's actually brand new. But we got the brush out, so we'll run it down. Okay. Clean that up with a shop towel. Alright, through a little bit of movie magic, I have got the replacement nut and bolt. They're both 13mm on each side, and you probably all know this, but when you're working with the positive terminal, particularly in a metal car, not so much in a fiberglass car, but particularly in a metal car, you want to disconnect the ground cable, because that way, in case you're working with the positive cable and one of your tools strikes the body or something metal, it doesn't arc out because you've removed the ground cable. It's out of the circuit. So, yeah. This trunk is becoming a mess, and it's my fault. And that fell, but luckily I can still see it. Started, and stick this terminal on the battery. All the way down. Oh, that's funny. So the battery covering from the factory doesn't actually fit because of the brown wires that go next to it. So there's no way that could have been completely installed without trimming the side of it off. Ah, Lotus, you're so funny. Ta-da! Now, I sprayed this. Again, off camera, I sprayed this with a little bit of penetrating lube. So I'm going to give that 15 seconds to work before I decide to break it just like the other one. Alright, an astonishing 3 minutes has passed since I sprayed this. We'll see if it had any effect. Ah, it had the exact effect as the other one. It completely broke. But that's what we needed in this case. Clean this up just a little bit. And install the new bolt. that looks good. And I gotta reach in there with a wrench and get that tight, but my arms are gonna block anything you're gonna see, so I'm not gonna bother filming that. Okay, ignition coil down, battery terminal down. Now we're gonna pull the warm-up regulator off the car. The warm-up regulator is always mounted directly to the motor because it picks up ambient heat, and that's how it mechanically knows how the car is warm. Bosch CIS is just an amazing revolution that came along in the early 70s that is a mechanical fuel injection system. There's a couple of electrical parts, like you've got an idle air valve that's literally just a aperture that has a bimetallic spring, and as it warms up, it closes that aperture. That's how your idle is higher when the motor's cold, and then that warms up. Again, that's mounted directly to the motor too. Plus, it has an electrical connection on it usually, and you've got a bimetallic strip on the temp sensor that powers a cold start injector whenever the engine is cold. When the engine's warm, no power to the cold start injector. The system's entirely analog on the early cars. This one does have a lambda system, which was added in the early 80s on most of the CIS cars. So it does have an oxygen sensor, and it has this little thing it's actually a fuel injector that the lambda computer either pulses or doesn't pulse to alter the air-fuel ratio by changing control pressure. And control pressure is the exact same thing that the warm-up regulator controls. So it's actually a very important part. The warm-up regulator has an electrical connection that helps it warm up on really cold starts, and for the most part that times out. I believe there's actually a second strip in there that times that out after about 2 minutes maybe. This is not the factory banjo bolt, obviously. This is a bolt for the pressure gauge. So in a minute I'll wander around and try and figure out where I put that original bolt. But we're gonna put the pressure gauge back on after we test this. So be sure you watch out for the little banjo washers that are easy to lose. Okay. Drip a little gas, that'll evaporate just fine. And let's move this over to the bench and disassemble it. We'll see how my workbench gets messier and messier as we get through this series. So, disassembly of these. By the way, this is not recommended for novices. There are places like Special T Auto that'll rebuild these for you. Let's just say I'm part of the advanced class, or maybe I'm just willing to buy one if I completely mess this one up. But anyway, Special T will rebuild them, but if they find out you open it up, man, all bets are off. Almost got it. So, 4 flathead screws, and it's got these little captive nuts on the back side. Screws will drop out. Move those over to the side, and don't just yank because you've got electrical stuff in here. So, and this will probably make a good blooper reel. There's a metal clip here that holds this electrical connector up, and the trick is to work it on this side just enough to create a gap, and then you can stick in a screwdriver and sort of play with that to wedge that off. And try not to stab yourself in the middle finger of your left hand. And that went pretty good. Okay, so you lay that to the side and then carefully open this thing up. All right, this is very important. This is important, and we'll come back to those. Okay, so this thing in the bottom, which is also heated, it has a heating element, I'm not entirely sure, but this thing in the bottom, Lotus calls atmospheric correction. And there's a little bulb here that gets bigger or smaller as your altitude changes. And by getting bigger or smaller, it changes the preload on these little push rods here, this little pin. And what you've got all the way up in here past this strip is basically a fuel pressure regulator. I'm going to pull off this warm-up strip here so we can get a better look at that. So it's just a single 6mm or 10mm nut on a 6mm stud. But pay close attention to everything comes apart. I'm actually going to lose the gloves right now because even though I hate the smell of gasoline, I really need the dexterity to be able to grab these parts and pull them out. So that part comes off. This is, I believe what this does is this actually turns off the warm-up strips after it gets a load pushed on it. I can see there's contact right now, and this is bimetallic. So I think as this warms up, this actually breaks the contact and quits heating up the element. Getting this out would be better or easier if I had a nice set of needle nose pliers at the house, but for some reason I don't. So gently try and grab this thing and sort of work it up. It doesn't look like it, but each time I'm getting about a couple millimeters further up. Don't you love it when stuff takes twice as long when you just don't have the right tools on you? Ta-da! Okay, we got that off. Now we can actually pull the electrical connector out. Okay, so this is a bimetallic strip, and as it warms up, it raises up, actually, and this sits, when it's assembled, this sits here, okay? And this little pin goes up into our regulator here, right here. And this, as it goes up, it pushes on the regulator, which raises the control pressure, which leans out the air-fuel mixture. So when it's assembled correctly, this thing pushes down on this spring to reduce the pin's load on the regulator. So as it warms up, it pulls away. Let's say, we'll do a really extreme example because it's really not that far, but so it's pushing down on the pin when the engine's cold. So there's no load on the regulator. As it warms up, it comes up and the spring and pin are able to put a stronger load on the regulator, which raises the control pressure. So inside the regulator, this is just a little metal push T-shaped thing on the inside. I don't even know how to describe it. Anyway, it pushes on a metal diaphragm. There's an O-ring in here. Fuel comes in this side, and depending on how tight this little guy is being pushed on, some fuel comes out this side. One thing that's really important to do when you initially look at these, you don't even have to disassemble it to do this, is look at, there's a little stainless screen in there that filters the fuel going into the warm-up regulator. And just make sure that is clear. I used some brake cleaner. I actually went on the back side. I had this pulled apart, went on the back side and blew it through and made sure that that screen is clear. Because if that's obstructed, it's going to raise the control pressure because the fuel's not able to flow through the warm-up regulator. Okay, so hopefully you have a pretty good idea of how the warm-up regulator works. And we're just going to put it back together. I've gone through, cleaned out this diaphragm in here, made sure that this little pin is able to move freely. The diaphragm doesn't have any obstructions on it. The O-ring's in pretty good shape. So we're just going to reassemble it. Warm-up regulator is now reinstalled on the car. I've got my gauge installed, and I'm going to check cold warm-up regulator pressure or control pressure. That's why I do not have the electrical connector plugged in. And all I really need to do, I don't even have to start the motor. I'm just going to turn on the fuel pump and watch what the pressure gauge does. We're looking for about 32.5 PSI. All right, that looks like that's happy right around 34 PSI. I think that is close enough, and we're going to be real happy with that. Let's see if the car will start and idle better than it has before. we go. It took a little bit to build fuel pressure to the injectors because I had the system open, but that is a smooth idle, right about 1250 RPM. So we're warming up, and like I described on the bench, as the car gets warmer, the control pressure starts climbing higher. This one's coming up a little bit slow because I still don't have the electrical connection connected, but we'll see that climb up to about probably 45, 50 PSI on a fully warm motor. As I'm editing this, I noticed that the motor sounds really knocky, but I assure you, it actually sounds perfectly normal for a Lotus 4-cylinder. We're going to call that it for the day. I really appreciate your comments. Like and subscribe and hit the notification bell, and we'll see you next time. I don't know what to say.